Salve or salvete, today's video is going to be about participles. So what are participles? Participles are verbal adjectives. Well, what do I mean by that? They're verbal in the sense that they come from a verb, they're formed from a verb, and it takes the same meaning as a verb. However, they're mostly adjectives because they have to modify nouns, and since they have to modify nouns, they have to agree in gender, number, and case with the noun that it is modifying. So we know about adjectives. If I just had the sentence, the happy boy, we know that happy is an adjective modifying boy. But what if I had sentences like the sitting boy or the playing boy? Sitting and playing, they're both modifying boy. However, they both come from verbs. Since they come from verbs, but they're still modifying nouns, hence the verbal adjective term, they are referred to as participles. Now that we have a basic understanding of what participles are, I'm going to talk to you about the 4 different participles in Latin, just to give you a brief overview. If you've reached chapter 33 of Ecce Romani, you've talked about a perfect passive participle. If you notice in that description, there is a tense, being perfect, and there is a voice, being passive. You can extrapolate from that there are different participles based on different tenses and different voices, and that would be a correct assumption. So this chart shows the 6 different possibilities for participles that there are in Latin. However, out of those 6 options, as I said earlier, there are only 4. So, going tense by tense, starting with present, there is a present active participle, but there is not a present passive participle. There is not a perfect active participle, but there is a perfect passive participle. If you have reached opponent verbs, you might have heard of a perfect active participle of sorts being the participle when you just have the form that is not sum of the third principal part. However, that is better referred to as a perfect participle, as it's not entirely active, but not entirely passive. I will not be covering deponent participles in this video. As I said earlier, there are 4 different participles. I've reached 2. There's only 2 boxes left. So there is both a future active and a future passive participle. I have starred the future passive participle because that participle you're not going to touch really until you get into Latin 3. So, just to make sure that we are all clear, there are 4 participles in Latin: the present active, perfect passive, and future active, as well as a future passive participle. The future passive participle, it's starred because it's a Latin 3 concept. I will go over it in this video, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. There is no present passive or perfect active participle. Let us start our journey into participles with the present active participle. So the present active participle, or you'll also hear me refer to it as the PAP. This is formed by going to your second principal part and removing that infinitive ending, so the RA, ARA, and so on. And then, once you've got that stem, you're going to add one of the following endings based on its conjugation. You'll add ons if it's first conjugation, you'll add ens if it's second or third conjugation, and you will add ens if it's third IO or fourth. So some examples, one from every conjugation. We have amons. This comes from amo. Amo, go to the second principal part. Amare, drop the ARE, you're just left with and then since it's first conjugation, you add ons, which leaves you with amons. Habens comes from habeo, habeo, second principal part, habere, and then go take away that are, and then you're just left with hab. Go to which ending that you're going to add the ens, so habens would be your present active infinitive for habeo. For mito, that's where mittens comes from, is mito. Mito, go to your second principal part, mittere, drop the ERE, and then you're just left with mit, and then add ens since it's third conjugation, and then you're left with mittens as your PAP. Capiens, this comes from capio. So capio, go to the second principal part. Capio is third IO, so this would be capere. Drop the ERE. You're just left with cop, and then you add ens since it's third IO. So then it's capiens as your PAP. Lastly, for our fourth conjugation example, audiens, this comes from audio. So audio, go to the second principal part, audire, drop the IRE, and then add ens. So audiens is your present active participle. So now that we have the present active participles formed, these are translated as verbing. The two examples that I gave earlier, the playing boy or the sitting boy, both of those would be examples of PAPs. They're translated as verbing. So with those examples up there, amans would be translated as loving, habens would be translated as having or holding, mittens would be translated as sending, capiens would be translated as capturing or seizing, and audiens would be translated as hearing. Another way you can translate participles is substantively. So I'm just going to take a second and go over substantives. Substantives, these are adjectives that do not modify nouns because they're being used as the noun itself. You can spot these substantives because they don't modify anything else in the sentence. It's just them alone. And then you know that you just know that's the substantive, and that's going to be used in place of a noun for that sentence. So we've seen neuter plural. We've seen that as a substantive where we can do blank things. So hike, this is these things. This is hike, this is neuter plural of hikaikok, so these things. So let's take a sentence, hike Cornelio placebant. These things were pleasing to Cornelius. In that sentence, hike can't agree with anything. The only other noun is Cornelio. Cornelio is dative. Hike is nominative. So we know that that's going to be used substantively as these things. Another substantive that you will see is multa, or this entire phrase, multa et mira, which is either many things or many and wonderful things. Most of the time in Latin, if you see multa, it's going to be this neuter substantive. So it's a safe bet that if you see multa, it's many things. A sentence where you could see multa et mira would be in the sentence, pueri multa et mira de Cornelia dicebant. In this sentence, multa et mira is the only thing in the accusative. Pueri is nominative. De Cornelia, that's all ablative. So you know that that's being used substantively. Another way, when it's not neuter plural, and there's just that adjective and it's not modifying anything, you can translate it as ones or men or women, man or woman, depending on the gender. So let's take this sentence. Fortissimi urbem custodi verunt. In this sentence, fortissimi, that's an adjective that means very brave. However, that's the only nominative in that sentence, so it can be translated substantively as the very brave ones. It can also be translated as the very brave men, since that long I ending denotes that it is masculine. So that entire sentence can be translated as the very brave men guarded the city. And you don't have to have weary there. You can have that stand alone and have fortissimi mean the very brave men. One last example of a PAP being used substantively regularly is the word adstantes. Adstantes is literally translated as the one standing nearby, but we know it more colloquially as bystanders. Adstantes, this is the PAP from the verb adsto, meaning to stand near. So we use this all the time substantively, and we don't even know it. And I think that that's pretty cool once I learned about PAPs. It's one of the connections that I made. Now I've brought us back to our title slide to show us the quote that I had at the beginning. This is the motto of Dartmouth College, or as I pronounced it last year at National Curtamen, Dartmouth. Apologies to anyone that's gone to Dartmouth. But anyways, this is their Latin motto. Vox clamantis in desero. This is translated into English as the voice of the shouting one in the wilderness. Here, clemantis, this is a PAP being used substantively. In order for it to agree with a noun, it has to agree with a noun in gender, number, and case. Here, nothing else is in the genitive. Vox is nominative, and indesero, well, that's ablative. So that has to be used substantively. Since there is an ambiguous form in the genitive for masculine, feminine, and neuter, it's probably best to translate this as one. And it's singular, so it's one, it can't be ones. So that's how you can translate clemantis as of the shouting one in this motto. Now, we move on into declining PAPs, which gets kind of tricky. But don't worry, this is the hardest one, and the rest of them are not nearly as difficult. Since participles are adjectives, they can decline. Present active participles decline like third declension adjectives of one termination. I'm going to say that again. Third declension adjectives of one termination. There's a lot to unpack in that sentence, so don't worry, I'll break it down for you. Hearing that sentence sounds a lot like in Kurtamen the first time that you will hear give the third person plural perfect active indicative of a verb, and you're like a deer in headlights, like, what are all these terms? But don't worry, this isn't that hard, I'll break it down. So third declension, one termination adjectives, all that means is that it's a third declension adjective, so it will have those blank isi, eme endings. Well, it goes long I or E in the ablative. Normally, third declension adjectives go long I in the ablative, but I'll get to that rule really quickly. One termination, all that means is that there is going to only be one form in the nominative for masculine, feminine, and neuter. So the example that I give here is that PAPs, they'll decline like the adjective ingens and gentis, meaning huge. So one termination, like I just said, it has one form for the masculine, one form for the feminine, one form for the neuter. So like ingens, it's ingens, 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 ingentis, 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 ingenti, ingenti, ingenti. There's only one form. Another third declension adjective of one termination is sapiens, and audax is another one. There are also third declension adjectives of two termination. These are the ones that most of the time, the two terminations that you'll see go is, a. So like omnis, omnis, omne, and brevis, brevis, brewe. They'll have the same masculine and feminine form, but they'll have something different for the neuter. And then there are third declension adjectives of three termination. This one is a different nominative form for masculine, feminine, and neuter. So those are adjectives like acer, acris, acre, and keller, kelleris, kellere. So now that I've told you what a third declension adjective of one termination is, let us decline it. So for this one, I'm going to be using the PAP of amo, which is amans, as we deduced earlier. So, moving into the nominative singular, it's amans, amans, amans. Remember what I just said, third declension adjective of one termination, there's going to be one form going all the way across. So it's amans, amans, amans. Getting into the genitive, like I hinted to with clemantis, this is ambiguous for masculine, feminine, and neuter again. So it will be amantis, amantis, amantis. Dative, nothing funky here. Amanti, amanti, amanti. And then we get into the accusative. This is the first time where you see a difference, where it's amantem, amantem, amans. Remember the neuter rule, the nominative and the accusative, they gotta be the same. This does not change just because we're declining an adjective. So it goes amantem, amantem, amans. Now we get into the ablative singular. This can either go amanti, 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 like a normal third declension adjective, or it can go amante, 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 like a third declension noun. Most of the time, you are going to be using amanti as your ablative singular for a PAP. However, if the PAP is being used substantively, or you are in an ablative absolute, you will have that short E ending. I'll say that again. If you are using the participle substantively, or you are in an ablative absolute, you will use the short e ending. Short e ending, ablative absolutes, and substantively. The rest, for most of the rest of the time, you will use the long I like a normal third declension adjective. Going into the plural, there's not a whole lot of surprises here. One thing I forgot to mention, so it's third declension. This means that it's I stemmed in the plural. So you'll see it here, amantes, amantes, amantia, then into amantium, 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 and then amantibus, 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 and then amantes, amantes, amantia. Remember, neuter rule, the accusative and the nominative need to be the same. And then ablative, it's the same as the dative, ablative plural, so amantibus, amantibus, amantibus. So now what I'm going to do is let's just go through some guided practice. So I'm going to take some sentences and I'm just going to walk through them, show you some ways, suggest some hints to help you when you're translating. So let's take this first sentence. Tristissimus eram quod ego aedificia ardentia in urbe vidi. So in this sentence, first thing that you want to do for not just for this sentence, for any sentence really when you're working with participles, underline the participle. Identify it. In this sentence, it's ardentia. Next thing that you want to do is see what it agrees with, especially with present active participles when they can be used substantively. This is especially paramount. So ardentia, that agrees with aedificia. It agrees in gender, number, and case with the two. Both are neuter, plural, and accusative. Ardentia, if you don't know, this comes from ardeo, meaning to burn. Ardeo, ardere, arsi, arsus. You can get arson. That's where that's derived from. So now that we know our PAP and we know where it is derived from, we know how to translate it. If you remember, you translate PAPs as verbing. So ardeo, the PAP of ardeo, ardentia in this case, that would be translated as burning. So now that we have our PAP down, we can go through the rest of the sentence. I'm going to zoom in on PAPs, and once I get like the PAP clause done, then I'm just going to translate the rest of the sentence because it's not as hard. I just want to make sure that you understand how to translate the PAP, what it goes with, and that kind of stuff. So now I'll officially get into the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence translates, I was very sad because I saw the burning buildings in the city. Remember, ardentia, the ia ending denotes that it's plural, so plural buildings. There are multiple buildings, and I would be very sad too if I saw buildings burning in the city. Now, let's take this sentence. The mother bound the wounds of the crying girl. In this sentence, first thing, like I've said, underline our participle. Here, it's crying. You know it's crying because that crying is a PAP because it's modifying girl, and it's a present active participle since it has the ing ending. It has the verbing crying. So now that we have our PAP, I've hinted to, you got to see what it agrees with. It agrees with girl. That's what it's modifying. So crying, this comes from the verb lacrimo. It doesn't come from the verb lacrimo. That's how you translate it into Latin. In Latin, if you want to translate crying, you need to go to the verb lacrimo. It's a standard first conjugation verb, are aviatus, so not a whole lot there. So now we got to understand the PAP, or not the PAP. Now you got to understand the GNC, rather. That's a different acronym. You got to understand the gender, number, and case of what it's modifying. Girl in this sentence, that is feminine singular and genitive. So we got to take the feminine singular and genitive form of the PAP. So forming the PAP, it would be lacrimo, go to the second principal part, which would be lacrimare, drop the ARE, so you're just left with lacrim, and then you add ans since it's first conjugation. So lacrimans would be the nominative form. Since it's ans antes, it would be lacrimantes as your genitive. As I've said, it's ambiguous, so lacrimantis would be your feminine form, and it's singular, not plural, so lacrimantis, that's the form that you want to use. So lacrimantis, that's how you would translate this PAP into Latin. Now we have our PAP down, I can go to the rest of the sentence. Mater vulnera puellae lacrimantis ligavit. Congratulations, you've learned one of the 4 participles. You're probably thinking, that was a long time. Are the other participles this hard? The answer is no, because I don't have to talk about substantives, and they decline, and the rest of the participles decline like first, second adjectives, so I don't have to decline one of them for you. So, without further ado, let's get into the perfect passive participle. The perfect passive participle, this is formed by taking your 4th principal part. That's it. You don't have to add anything to it. It's just your 4th principal part. However, if you are in a textbook like Ecce Romani, they'll sometimes give the 4th principal part as something that ends in TURUS or URUS. So like ambulo, the 4th principal part that Ecce Romani gives is ambulaturus. You want to have the 4th principal part, it has to end in TUS or just US. If it ends in URUS, that's our future active participle, which I will get to in a second. So something like, let's take mito. It's misus would be that 4th principal part, so that's actually a perfect passive participle. But if you took a verb like dormio, which Ecce Romani gives its 4th principal part as dormiturus, the URUS denotes that is not actually a perfect passive participle, but a future active participle. So the perfect passive participle, or PPP, that is translated as having been verbed or just simply verbed. So the PPP, they decline like first, second adjectives, so the normal us, so it's tus if it was modifying something masculine, ta if it was modifying something feminine, or tum if it was modifying something neuter, and those are just the nominatives. Rest of them are the normal first, second adjectives. So some examples of PPPs. So let's start with amo. Amo, go to the 4th principal part, which is amatus, and that's your perfect passive participle, and that can be translated as having been loved or just simply loved. Hapeo, for that one, go to the 4th principal part, which is habitus, and then that's just having been held or held. Capio, go to the 4th principal part of that, which is captus, and then that can be translated as having been captured or just captured. And then audio, go to the 4th principal part, which is auditus, and then that can be translated as having been heard or just simply heard. So as you see here, these all end in TUS, they don't end in TURUS or URUS, which is how you know that they're perfect passive participles. Now let's start our example sentences for the perfect passive participles. Here's the first one. Caesar necatus a senatoribus ad terram cacidit. In this sentence, we're looking for something that ends in tus, and it also looks like it comes from a verb. In this case, it's necatus. Necatus in the sentence is our perfect passive participle. Next thing that we want to do is we want to figure out what it agrees with. Normally, if there's a participle, it's going to agree with something that's behind where it's currently at in the sentence. It's something to the left of where it currently is. Another way is you can also see what agrees in gender numbering case. The gender numbering case of necatus is masculine, singular, and nominative. So the only other thing that's masculine, singular, and nominative in this sentence is Caesar, which happens to be the only word to the left of the participle. So necatus, this comes from the verb neco necare, which is one of the hundreds of thousands of Latin verbs meaning to kill. There's not 100,000 Latin verbs meaning to kill, just hyperbole. There's probably about a dozen or so. But anyway, it means to kill. So the perfect passive participle with this having been verbed format, it would be translated as having been killed, or you could just translate it simply as killed. Either works, but I think having been killed works better in this instance. So now that we know how to translate our participle, we can translate the rest of the sentence, which is Caesar or Caesar, having been killed by the senators, fell to the earth. Now we'll move into our English to Latin sentence. This is, the gladiator attacked the lion with a sword, having been made by a merchant. So, one thing that I want to hit on here is how to distinguish between a verb that's just in the perfect tense and a perfect passive participle. Verbs, attacked in the sentence is not a PPP, it's just a normal verb in the perfect tense. You know it's a verb because to that verb there is a subject and there is a clear object. There's a clear subject committing the verb onto a direct object. So my teacher, what she does is she will kick a trash can across the room. That's and that's a really clear explanation of what the subject is, what the verb is, and what the direct object is. So the subject, my teacher, what's the verb, kicking, and the direct object, and the object of the kicking is the trash can. So that's how you know that it's a verb. Whereas a participle, it's modifying a noun, it's being used as an adjective, so it's giving more information to the noun. So in this sentence, having been made is our perfect passive participle because it's giving more information to the sword. That's what it's agreeing with. So when we translate all of this into Latin, the phrase having been made has to agree in gender, number, and case with sword. Having been made, that would be, first we're going to do GNC. I'm sorry, I forgot about the order of the slides. But anyway, so the GNC of sword is masculine singular and ablative. This is an ablative of means. The gladiator attacks a lion with, what does he attack the lion with? With a sword, so it's ablative of means. So that's going to have to be, so like I just said, it's going to have to, having been made is going to have to agree in gender, number, and case with sword when we translate it. Now I can get into the verb that it comes from. Having been made, this comes from facio facere. So the fourth principal part of this is factus. The masculine singular ablative form of factus is facto. So that is our participle. So now that we have our participle, we can translate the rest of the sentence. Just a quick thing with this sentence, it should be a mercatore, not a mercator. It should be ablative. I forgot that. So I will say it in the ablative, and I will also make a note in the description that I messed up. If you haven't noticed, I mark in the descriptions if I notice areas where I could be more clear or I've messed up the Latin in a couple of instances. So this entire sentence into Latin would go: Gladiator leonem gladio facto a mercatore oppugnavit. All right, 2 down, 2 to go. Now we move into the future active participle. The future active participle is formed by taking your perfect passive participle and adding the UR in between the T and the U. This is what I was hinting to with the turris ending. So take ambulo. The fourth principal part of that is ambulaturus. So that's it. So that is a future active participle because of the UR. Another way to think of that is notice that there is a UR after the T in future. So future, it has that UR in it. So the future active participle, this can be translated in a litany of ways. You can translate it as about to verb, going to verb, intending to verb, or my favorite, destined to verb. Any of those ways work. Like a perfect passive participle, the future active participle, it declines like a first, second adjective, so us, Just remember you're modifying the stuff after that R, so it would be turris if it was modifying something masculine, turra if it was modifying something feminine, and turum if it was modifying something in the neuter. So some examples of this. Amo, you go to amatus, which is your perfect passive participle, and you add that UR in between the T and the U to get your PPP, or get your future active participle, my bad, which is amaturus, which is about to love, or going to love, or intending to love, or destined to love. Habeo, go to your perfect passive participle, which is habitus. and then add that UR in between the T and the U, so you get habituris, which is about to hold, going to hold, destined to hold, intended to hold, any of those. Winco. Take winco, go to the perfect passive participle of that, which is victus, and then add the UR in between the T and the U, which leaves you with victurus, which is about to conquer. About to conquer, going to conquer, yada yada. Audio, go to auditus, which is your perfect passive participle, and then add the UR in between the T and the U, which gives you auditurus, which is about to hear, going to hear, intended to hear, or destined to hear. Now let's do our practice sentences for the future active participle. Here's our first sentence. Icarus volaturus trans mare de periculis a suo patre narratus est. First thing that we want to do in this sentence is look for our participle. So we're looking for a future active participle, so we're looking for a word that has a UR in the last 3 or 4 letters or so. The only word in this sentence that fits that description is volaturus. We can also see in volaturus it has the TUR-US ending. That was the same ending that we saw with a lot of the example words that I showed you when I was introducing this concept, like amaturus and victurus. Those both have the TUR-US ending. So we know here we're working with a future active participle. Like I've said earlier, the participles, they normally modify stuff to the left. Luckily for us, this is the second word of the sentence, so there's only one thing that it can modify, which is Icarus. We also know that this truly does work because they both have the same gender number in case. Both are masculine, singular, and nominative. Volaturus, this comes from the verb volo volare, meaning to fly, not volo vele, meaning to want or wish. It says volo volare, meaning to fly. So, since we know that the verb that this comes from means to fly, we can plug it into our future active participle translations, and we can translate this participle as about to fly, going to fly, intending to fly, or destined to fly. I can tell you that with this sentence, it's probably best to translate it as about to fly or going to fly. I translated it as about to fly. So now we have our participle down, we can get to the rest of the sentence. The entire sentence translated would be, Icarus, about to fly across the sea, was told about the dangers by his own father. You can change around those 2 clauses if you want. You could do was told by his own father about the dangers. Either works. Now let's move on to our next sentence. Cornelius gave the letter to the messenger about to return to Rome. Since we're dealing with something in English, we want to look for the future active participle translation. So we want to look for an about to verb, going to verb, and so on. Here we see this with the phrase about to return. So we know that this is our future active participle. So we'll have to have that UR in the last 3 or 4 letters when we translate this back into Latin. Next thing that we want to do is see what it's modifying. In this sentence, it's modifying messenger. So when we translate the sentence into Latin, they have to have the same gender number in case. The verb to return in Latin, that's redeo redire, meaning to return. Redeo does not have a perfect passive participle, however, it does have a future active participle, which is rediturus. The next thing that we want to do is determine the gender number in case of the noun that it's modifying. In this sentence, I'll just do this first clause rather, Cornelius gave the letter to the messenger. That phrase, to the messenger, that's the indirect object. So we're going to have to bring it into the dative. So messenger will be dative. There's only one messenger, so it's singular, and the word in Latin for messenger is masculine. So about to return is going to have the masculine singular and dative ending. So rediturus with a masculine singular and dative ending is redituro. So now that we have our future active participle down, we can go to the rest of the sentence. This entire sentence translated would be Cornelius epistulam nuntio redituro Romam dedit. One of the cool things that you can do with future active participles is this crazy new construction called active periphrastic. So what is active periphrastic? Active periphrastic, all it is the future active participle plus a form of sum esse. So an example of that would be the sentence, Caesar victorus erat Gallium. In this sentence, we see the phrase victorus erat. This is a future active participle coming from vinco vincere, and then erat, which is an imperfect form of sum esse. So this is active periphrastic. When you see an active periphrastic like this, there is a specific way that you want to translate it. Here, what you do is you translate the form of sum first, and then you translate the participle. So in this sentence, it would be he was, you get the erat translated first, and then about to conquer, or going to conquer, or whatever translation of the future active participle you're going to use, about to verb. So that entire sentence would be Caesar was about to conquer Gaul. Remember, form of sum first, you translate that, and then your participle about to conquer. Some more examples of this. Servi fugaturi erant Romam. Here, fugaturi erant, that is a future active participle, plus an imperfect form of sum esse, so it's an active periphrastic. So with that in mind, we can translate this as the slaves were about to flee Rome. You can also translate this, you could have it as Roma with a long A, and the slaves were about to flee from Rome, but I'll make a note about that in the description. But the big thing that I want you to notice here is how you translate that form of sum esse first, and then you translate the future active participle. Another example of this would be Cornelia Valerium amatura est. So active periphrastic is amatura est. And then you can translate this sentence as Cornelia is, get that form of sum esse first, going to love, that's your participle, Valerius. Cornelia is going to love Valerius. Now that we've learned 3 of the 4 participles, let's move into our final participle, the future passive participle, also referred to as the gerundive. So the gerundive, this is really a Latin 3 concept. I'm going to show you how to form it, but that's about all I'm going to do for this slide. There's going to be no sentences, nothing like that. There's a bunch of cool stuff you can do with it, like passive periphrastic and forming gerunds, but I'm not going to cover that as this video is geared toward Latin 2 students. So the gerundive, this is formed by taking the present active participle, taking the s off of its nominative form, and adding the ending dus, which will give you the entire ending endus. Another way you can think of it is taking the ns ending and inserting a du in between those 2 letters. So some examples of this. Let's take the verb deleo. This is to destroy. Deleo, take its PAP, which is delens, drop the S, which is delen, and then add the dus ending, which gives you delendus. I started with this one because, as most Latin students know, the phrase Carthago delenda est. Well, delenda, in that phrase, that's a future passive participle. Actually, Carthago delenda est is a pretty prime example of a passive periphrastic. But now let's jump into some verbs that we know more regularly. We'll take the verb amo. Amo, get its present active participle, which is amons, drop the s, which gives you amon, and then add the dus ending, which is amandus. Lastly, let's take the verb winco. Winco, go to its present active participle, which is winkens. Here, drop the s. I dropped the ns. As long as you know that you're adding the ending endus to the end of it, you can take as many letters off as you want. You just have to know that it's formed off of the PAP with the ending endus. So take the stem winken, or in my case winke, add the dus or endus, which gives you winkendus, as the future passive participle of winko. These are translated as to be verbed. I have talked way too much in this video, so let's put what you know to the test in some practice sentences. And as you see, I have graduated to bubble letters on the whiteboard, but just for one line. But anyways, let's get to these sentences. Take a second, pause the video, try and translate them on your own from Latin to English and then from English to Latin, respectively. Now that you've had a second to translate them, I will go over them. Just as a quick side note, you're going to see in that second sentence, the prepositional phrase into the dining room will magically morph into the kitchen. I switched up that sentence at the last second, so I wasn't able to switch these next two pictures, but by the time I get to that sentence, it'll say into the dining room again. Don't worry about that. I wanted you to translate that as into the dining room. Anyway, let's get a move on with this first sentence. Cornelius suam filion sedentem sub abore conspexit. In this sentence, first thing that we want to do is look for a participle. So what are we looking for? Present active participle that will have an nt in it, kind of like at the end of present. So think present, look for that nt. If we're looking for a perfect passive participle, we'll have a t plus some first, second adjective ending. If it is a future active participle, we're looking for that ur, like in future. That's what we're looking for in the Latin. Here, only one of those conditions is satisfied, the nt in present. We see that in the word sedentem. So sedentem, that is a present active participle. So next thing we want to do, see what is it modifying. So like I said, you want to look to the left to see what it's modifying. The only other thing in the accusative to the left of that participle is the phrase suam filiam. Suam, that's an adjective modifying filiam, so all of that goes together. Now that we've identified our present active participle in C's and we've seen what it agrees with, where does it come from? What's the verbal part of this? So this comes from the verb sedeo, which means to sit. So since this is a present active participle with the verbing translation, it means sitting. Now that we have our present active participle translated, we can get to the rest of the sentence, but one quick note first. Since this present active participle is in the accusative, wait to translate the present active participle plus what it's modifying until the end of the sentence. If it's nominative, then you can translate it at the beginning. So if it's sedens and it's clearly modifying Cornelius, you could have Cornelius sitting and then the rest. You can have that, but since this is accusative, or if it was any other case that's not nominative, you want to wait until the end of the sentence to translate it. So with that in mind, the sentence can be translated as Cornelius caught sight of his daughter sitting under a tree. Now that we have this first sentence down, let's move into the next sentence. The slaves carried the food into the dining room, having been prepared very diligently by the cook. So since this is an English sentence, what we want to do is we want to look for some of the English translations for those participles. So we're either looking for that verbing when it's clearly modifying a noun, that having been verbed or verbed, once again, when it's clearly modifying a noun, or that about to verb, going to verb, intending to verb litany, that would be the future active participle. Here, only one of those conditions is met, and that's the having been verbed condition. We see that in the phrase having been prepared. That means that's a perfect passive participle. Next thing that we want to do, see what it's agreeing with. In this sentence, it's agreeing with food. So we know that when we translate this sentence into Latin, those two will have the same gender numbering case. Prepared, the verb to prepare in Latin, that's paro, parare. It's a normal first conjugation verb, so aviatus. So paratus, that is the PPP, and we can choose the correct ending based on the gender numbering case. Speak of the devil, the gender numbering case of food in that sentence is masculine, singular, and accusative. Accusative is the direct object. The slaves are carrying the food. or they carried the food. It's past tense, but anyways, it's still the direct object of that sentence, or of that sentence. So now that we have the G and C down, and we have the nominative form of our PPP down, we can adjust the nominative form to agree with our gender, number, and case. So the masculine singular accusative form of paratus that we need to agree with food is paratum. Now that we have our PPP form down, we can translate the rest of the sentence. Servi cibum in triclinium atulerunt paratum diligentissime a quoquo. In this sentence, I have that in parentheses. You can either just use fero fere, or you can use a fero a fere. It doesn't make a difference which one you use. Either is acceptable. Now let's take a look at these two sentences. Quick note before we jump into them: orationem habere, that is an idiom which is translated into English as to deliver a speech. You're going to need that for that parenthesed out part in the first sentence. Make sure that it's not an infinitive that you use on habere. Make sure it's in the correct tense and person that makes sense in that sentence. So hint, hint, you're not going to have the infinitive ending, you're going to have an imperfect ending. So now that I have said that, take a second, pause the video, try and go over these. Now that you've had a second to go over these sentences, I will go over them for you. So let's take this first sentence. Cicero, or Cicero, was delivering a speech to the listening ones who were sitting in the forum. So this sentence, it's an English sentence. So what we want to do is we want to look for the English translation of a participle. So if we see something that's that verbing, we know it's a present active participle. If it's the having been verbed or verbed, it's a perfect passive participle. Or if it's the about to verb, going to verb litany, we know that's a future active participle. The next question that we want to ask ourselves is, if we identify one of those, is it being used as a true adjective? Is it being used substantively? Or is it not a participle at all? Is it just being used as a verb? So once you have answered those questions, then you can start to zone in on how to translate the participle. So the only participle in this sentence is in the phrase, the listening ones. You might have thought that delivering was a participle or sitting was a participle, kind of like how we saw with Active Periphrastic, that maybe with the form of sum esse it does something weird, but it doesn't. Future active participles are the only type of participles that do something funky like an active periphrastic with a form of sum. If you see the present active participle in a form of sum, like in was delivering or were sitting, that's just an imperfect translation for a verb. If you see the perfect passive participle plus a form of sum esse, that's just the perfect passive system. It's only in the future active participle that you'll get an active periphrastic type thing. So, as I just said, the listening ones, that's our only participle in this sentence. It is a present active participle. Now we want to see what it's modifying. Well, there's nothing that it's modifying in the sentence. This time, this is being used substantively. So since it's being used substantively, we know that we don't have to worry about anything else agreeing with it in gender, number, and case once we translate that into English. So now that we know that, we can dig a little deeper into this present active participle. The present active participle, it comes from audio, meaning to hear or to listen. The PAP, just the nominative singular form of that. So audio, go to the second principal part, audire, drop the IRE, which just leaves you with aud, then you add the ens, and now you've got audience. That's your nominative singular form. Now we have to take a look at the sentence and figure out its gender, number, and case. First, let's just start with the case because that makes things easier. In the sentence, it is the indirect object, so it's going to go into the dative. since it's listening ones with an S, we know that it's plural since there are multiple listening ones. Now we move into the gender of this present active participle. We have a little bit more flexibility since we know the third declension dative plural ending is ambiguous for masculine, feminine, and neuter. So we don't really have to worry about it. We know by the context of the sentence it's probably going to be masculine, but we don't know. Let's just, for the sake of the argument, make it masculine, just because we have to have a G and C. So the masculine plural and dative form of the present active participle from audio is audientibus. Now that we have this participle down, let's translate the rest of the sentence. The rest of the sentence is as follows: Cicero rationem audientibus qui in foro sedebant habebat. Just as a quick side note before we get into the next sentence, memento, relative pronouns take their gender and number from the antecedent, not their case. That is why we have the nominative form of a relative pronoun, but a dative antecedent. But, as you see, both are masculine and both are plural. Just as a hint for the next sentence, remember that. So, this next sentence, audacissimus puer e ramis descendit qui fracturi erant. So this sentence, it's in Latin, so we're going to look for one of the Latin clues to help tell us that we are dealing with a participle. So for that present active participle, we're looking for that NT, that present. For the perfect passive participle, we're looking for something that's the fourth principal part of a verb. We're looking for something that has a T in the last 2 or 3 letters, plus an ending that's indicative of a first-second declension adjective. For the future active participle, we're looking for that UR, like in future. And that final condition is the one that's ultimately met with the word fracturi. That is a future active participle. But wait, there's more. There is also a form of sum esse right next to it. And because we have a future active participle plus a form of sum esse, you know what that means? We can have a active periphrastic, which means we have to translate it in that formulaic form of sum first, then about to participle, or about to verb, rather. So let's see what's modifying what. So fracturi erant, that whole thing, that's going to be modifying qui. And just as a reference point, qui's antecedent is going to be ramis. So ultimately, we're talking about the branches, but fracturi erant is agreeing in gender numbering case with the qui. So let's talk about the participle itself. This comes from frango, meaning to break. So if we just had the participle alone, it would be about to break. But the addition of their erant means we got to translate that first. So this whole relative clause with the qui would be translated as which were about to break. So now that we have that down, we can translate the rest of the sentence. The very bold boy climbed down out of the branches, which were about to break. So you've nearly made it to the end of this video. There's only one thing that stands in between you and the enclosing, and that is this paragraph. I mean, you could just skip over this, but this is a good exercise, I think. So, what I want you to do here is, in a second, I will give you a chance to try and translate this paragraph. If for whatever reason you don't think that you can do it, that's not a problem. I'm going to give you a couple of hints along the way, try and help you, guide you in the right direction to try to get into the position to translate the paragraph. After each one of my hints, I will pause, and if you need to start the translation, pause the video, go ahead and do that. And if you need to make any corrections because of what I've said, do the same thing. Pause the video, make your corrections, and then keep on watching. So if you think you can do it, take a second, pause the video, try and translate this into Latin. All right, so here's my first hint. So I've noted, so there are going to be participles in this paragraph. This video is about participles, so there are a couple participles interspersed in this paragraph. So since this is in English, you want to look for those clues that denote the participles. So we want to look for either that verbing, which would denote a present active participle, that having been verbed or verbed, that denotes a perfect passive participle, or that about to verb, going to verb, intending to verb, destined to verb, that denotes a future active participle. And once you've located that, it's always a good habit, try and underline them so you know where the participles are. So that's my first hint. Take a second, pause the video, see if you need to change anything up or start. So here are our participles for this paragraph: having been forced, going to open, and the waiting ones. So the next thing that you want to think to yourself is, well, which participles are they? With the hint that I gave last time, this should be pretty easy. The having been forced, that's our perfect passive participle. Our going to open is the future active participle, and the waiting ones, that is a present active participle. Once you know that, the next question that you want to ask yourself is, well, what's it modifying? If you don't see what it's modifying, the next two questions you should ask yourself is, well, is this really a participle? Maybe it's being used as a verb. I can assure you with these three are the only participles in the sentence. There are no other participles. The next question is, if you're working with a present active participle, is this being used substantively if it's not modifying anything else? Also, a quick thing, remember active periphrastic. Remember that form of sum plus the future active participle, that gives us a unique construction. So remember both of those things. If you need to, take a second, pause the video, try and work it out, or try and correct some things. So, as I explicitly said, we have our three participles. Having been forced is a perfect passive participle, going to open is a future active participle, and waiting ones is a present active participle. As I alluded to, the present active participle, the waiting ones, this is being used substantively. Another thing that gives it away is the ones translation. That's normally a pretty good indicator of a substantive. Also, you can see it's not modifying anything. It's being used as the noun. The other thing that I was trying to tease out was the active periphrastic. Are, in this instance, the one in between which and going, that's going to have to be translated as a form of sum esse. We see that form of sum esse right up next to a future active participle. See the future active participle, see the form of sum esse, immediately you know that we're dealing with an active periphrastic. So hopefully that was helpful. The next thing that you want to think of is, well, what's it modifying? What's the gender numbering case? Because we know that that's got to be the same when we translate it into Latin. So take a second, pause the video, try and work it out. So now we know. So now here's what each of the participles are modifying. Having been forced modifies gladiators in gender numbering case. Gladiators is the subject of that sentence, so it's going to be in the nominative case. There's gladiators, there's multiple gladiators, so it's plural, and gladiators, gladiator, gladiatoris, that is masculine. The second thing is you want to look and see what's the future active participle. What's that modifying? That's modifying which. The gender numbering case of which is feminine, plural, and nominative. It's getting its gender number from the antecedent, which is the gates, and you know that it's nominative because which is the subject of that relative clause. Waiting ones, since it's not modifying anything, you don't have to worry about anything that is modifying because it's being used substantively. But you do have to know what the gender numbering case is. The gender number in case of waiting ones is masculine, plural, and accusative. So hopefully this helps you tease out what the participles are. The next one I'm going to show you what each of the cases are and what type of verb each of the verbs are. So if you're not there yet, the next one should help you a lot. So take a second if you need to make any corrections, pause the video, do what you gotta do. As promised, here's what the cases of each of the things are. As you see, I've color-coded this. If it has a red underline, it's in the nominative case. If it's genitive, it has that green squiggly, accusative, green circle, ablative, black circle. If it has a blue underline, then it's an indicative verb. If it is a blue box, it is an infinitive verb. As you will see, the participles are underlined twice, once to show that they're a verb, and the second time to show its case. So this is what it is. If there are some minor noun things that you need to straighten out, go ahead and do so. If you just need to straighten other things out, do that as well. So pause the video. This will be the last hint before I reveal how the sentence is translated. All right. So here is the translation for the sentence, or really the paragraph. So this paragraph is translated into Latin as the following. Gladiatores coacti leones ferocissimos ab imperatore pugnare a turba spectabitur. Portae amphitheatri quae apertuae sunt manentes retinent. Just really quickly, here are the principal parts of the verbs that I used as participles in this paragraph. To force or to compel, that's cogo, cogere, coegi, coactus. That's just one of my favorite verbs to use. That's why I used it. To open, that verb is aperio, aperire, aperui, apertus. It can also mean to uncover. Finally, to wait, that's also to stay or to remain. That verb is maneo, manere, mansi, mansus. If you used morantes, coming from the deponent verb moror, morari, morari, moratus sum, that would have been perfectly acceptable too. So now, in closing, participles, they're verbal adjectives. They're verbal in the sense that they come from a verb and it takes their meaning, but they're adjectives because they modify nouns and they have their gender number in case. There are all told 6 participles. There's a present active, perfect passive, and future active and future passive participles. For the present active participles, what you want to do is you want to go to the second principal part, drop the infinitive ending, and then add ons, ens, or ens depending on its conjugation. It's translated as loving. For the perfect passive participle, you want to go to the fourth principal part. Make sure it ends in us, not urus. Urus would be indicative of a future active participle. Your fourth principal part ends in tus. That's your PPP, and is translated as having been verbed or just simply verbed. The future active participle, this is formed by sticking a UR in between the T and the U of the perfect passive participle, or if you're a verb like ambulo and you have a textbook like Ege Romani that gives its fourth principal part as turus. It has that UR like in future. It's also the present active participle that has the NT most of the time like in present. To form the future passive participle, you take the present active participle and stick a DU in between the N and the S, or you take the present active participle, drop the S, and add dus as your ending. It is translated as to be verbed. You will see this in Latin 3. It is also referred to as the gerundive. Present active participles decline like a third declension adjective of one termination. If you need a mental model, think of ingens when you're declining a present active participle. This means that present active participles, they are I-stemmed in the plural. Present active participles, they can also be used substantively, which means is they don't necessarily have to have a noun that they're modifying. They can be translated as ones, or depending on the gender and number of the participle, men or women. Present or perfect passive participles, rather, and future active participles, those decline like first, second declension adjectives. They are not translated, they cannot be used substantively, so substantives only happen for present active participles. The future active participle plus a form of sum esse, this creates what's known as an active periphrastic. This means you have to translate the form of sum first, and then you translate the participle. So form of sum and then about to verb. It's in that formula. So an example, volatori sumus is we are about to fly. Now finally, this is the most important thing from this video. If you have fallen asleep and you've woken up right now, I don't care if you've missed everything else in this video. This is what I want you to take away from this. Participles must agree in gender, number, and case in whatever it modifies. Participles, they are adjectives. They have to agree with what they modify. Always make sure that you have the correct ending for the correct gender, number, in case. This is paramount. Always make sure you do this. Always check gender, number, in case. And with that, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching and have a great